Growing up, I was always the weird one in my family. While my brothers and cousins chased trends, bought flashy cars, and bragged about the brands they wore, I was the oddball who clipped coupons, shopped secondhand, and refused to spend money, unless absolutely necessary. Every family gathering turned into a parade of jokes at my expense. "Still driving that old clunker, huh, Ellie?" My cousin Mark would snicker, tossing his car keys, attached to a luxury brand fob, onto the table with a theatrical clink. "Hey, at least she's consistent," my brother Kyle would add, laughing along. "Always one step away from being a hoarder." Everyone would laugh, everyone except me. I used to smile tightly, brushing it off, pretending it didn't hurt. I told myself their opinions didn't matter, that I knew what I was doing. But deep down, the constant belittling left a bruise that never fully healed. It wasn't just playful teasing, it was judgment, disguised as humor. They thought I was cheap. They thought I was a failure. They thought I was less than them. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that there was a reason for my so-called thriftiness. I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck like most of them. Every penny I saved was carefully invested. Every skipped luxury was a building block for something bigger. But to them, I was just Ellie, the penny-pinching embarrassment of the family. The final straw came last Thanksgiving. We were gathered around my parents' massive dining table, a picture-perfect Norman Rockwell scene, at least on the surface. Underneath, the air was thick with the usual backhanded compliments and competitive small talk. Mark had just bought a new Tesla. Kyle was bragging about closing a big deal at work. My sister-in-law showed off a designer bag that cost more than my car. When the attention turned to me, I could feel it. The collective smirk, the anticipation of fresh material. "So, Ellie," Kyle said, barely able to hide his grin. "Still clipping coupons? Got any exciting new garage sale finds?" The table erupted in laughter. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Actually, I'm doing pretty well," I said, forcing a smile. "Oh, I'm sure you are," Mark said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Must be living the dream in that tiny apartment of yours." I opened my mouth to respond, but my mother chimed in, effectively ending the conversation. "Be nice, boys," she said lightly. "Ellie's always been practical." And just like that, I was dismissed, a footnote in a conversation that moved swiftly back to vacations, new homes, and six-figure bonuses. I sat there, picking at my food, feeling smaller and smaller with each passing minute. I wasn't angry that they had more. Good for them. I was angry that they thought they were better, that they measured success in square footage and horsepower, that they never once thought to ask what was behind my choices. I wasn't poor. I wasn't struggling. I had options. I had freedom, but they were so busy laughing at me that they couldn't see it. That night I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, their words echoing in my mind. "Still driving that old clunker, huh, Ellie? Got any exciting new garage sale finds?" The hurt turned into something sharper, colder, not just sadness, but resolve. They thought they knew everything. They thought I was a joke. But soon enough they were going to find out just how wrong they were. And when they did, I wouldn't need to say a single word. The truth would be louder than anything I could ever shout. This wasn't about revenge. At least, not at first. This was about respect, about reclaiming the dignity they had stripped away, one joke at a time. If they needed proof of who I really was, I was going to give it to them, and I would make sure they never forgot it. After that Thanksgiving, something in me shifted. Their laughter didn't just sting. It ignited something deeper. It made me see the pattern I had been living with for years. My family didn't just misunderstand me. They dismissed me. They belittled every choice I made, as if the only things that mattered were how much you could show off and how loudly you could brag. The more I thought about it, the more furious I became. I remembered birthdays where my gifts were sneered at because they weren't name brand enough. Holidays where my homemade cookies were pushed aside for expensive catered dishes. I thought back to the time I bought my parents a beautiful, heartfelt photo album for their anniversary, only to hear my mother later whisper to my aunt that I was too cheap to buy something real. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the complete lack of respect. And now, it had gone too far. I wasn't living like this by accident. I had sacrificed and strategized for over a decade. I had maxed out my retirement contributions before my friends even knew what a 401k was. I had invested in low-cost index funds religiously. I had bought property when the market crashed, renting it out for steady passive income. I had made hard, disciplined choices, alone. And here they were, laughing at me like I was a fool. What twisted the knife deeper was realizing that their reckless spending was catching up with them, even if they didn't talk about it out loud. Mark had credit card debt up to his ears. Kyle had refinanced his house twice already. My sister-in-law had posted a sob story about student loans on Facebook just a few months earlier. They were walking financial disasters wearing designer clothes. And somehow, I was the one they pitied. The injustice of it made my hands clench into fists whenever I thought about it. And then the ultimate insult came a few weeks later. I got a call from my mother. She sounded unusually sweet, which instantly put me on alert. "Ellie, sweetheart," she began, "your father and I were wondering, since you live so simply, maybe you could chip in a little extra for Dad's birthday party this year. You know, help out your brothers. They're just so busy with their careers and money's a little tight around the holidays." It took everything in me not to laugh or scream. They thought I was some naive little cash cow they could tap whenever they needed to fund their lavish lifestyles. The irony was almost too much to bear. They hadn't asked because they respected me or valued my help. They asked because they assumed I had nothing better to do with my money, because they thought they deserved it more than I did. That was the moment I knew I couldn't just sit back anymore. It wasn't enough to know quietly that I had built a life of security and freedom while they had spent themselves into a gilded corner. No, they needed to see it. They needed to feel the weight of their own ignorance pressing down on them, the way their words had pressed down on me for years. But I wasn't going to brag. I wasn't going to rub it in their faces with flashy purchases or a smug speech. No, I was going to let the truth come out in a way they couldn't ignore, couldn't dismiss, couldn't laugh away. And when it did, I wouldn't even need to raise my voice. Reality would do the talking for me. They had made a mistake when they assumed my quietness was weakness. They had made a mistake when they mistook humility for poverty. And they were about to realize that while they were busy trying to impress everyone else, I had built an empire right under their noses. They thought they were laughing at me. They had no idea. They were laughing at the richest person in the room. At first, I told myself it wasn't worth the energy. Let them think what they want. Let them live their Instagram-perfect lives full of debt and desperation. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need anything from them. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the years they had spent teaching our younger cousins, the family's next generation, that success was measured by shallow markers. The car you drive, the brand you wear, the size of your house. It was about the subtle poison they kept passing down. That wealth was something you showed off, not something you quietly built with patience and grit. That financial literacy was boring, and flashy spending was aspirational, and it made me sick. I had a goddaughter, Mia, Mark's daughter, only 9 years old, bright as a spark, and already starting to mimic the adults around her. One day, after Christmas dinner, she plopped down beside me and said, "Mom says you're poor, but you're really nice, Aunt Ellie." It hit me like a punch, to the gut. Poor. That's how they framed me in their homes. That's what they taught their children to believe. That because I didn't flaunt wealth, I didn't have it. That kindness was somehow a consolation prize for failure. And I saw it too, in how they treated my parents. Aging now, quietly struggling with mounting medical bills, but too proud and too stuck in appearances to downsize or change their habits. They had bought into the same lie. Keep up the image, no matter what it costs you in the end. If someone didn't break the cycle, if someone didn't show them another way, then Mia and all the others would grow up thinking that the emptiest life was the one worth chasing. I couldn't just stand by and let that happen. I owed it to myself, yes, but I owed it even more to Mia and anyone else in the family who still had a chance to see the truth before it was too late. I thought back to all the sacrifices I had made, the years of living below my means, while my friends posted beach vacations and new cars. The late nights studying investment strategies instead of going out drinking. The moments of doubt when it seemed like maybe I was being too cautious, too boring, too much of a nobody. And now, standing where I was, with multiple properties, a fully funded retirement account, significant investments, and complete financial freedom, I realized something vital. They hadn't just laughed at me. They had tried to make me doubt myself. They had tried to make me ashamed of the very things that had saved me. This wasn't petty anymore. This was justice. I wasn't going to scream at them or beg for recognition. I wasn't going to fight their ignorance with anger. I was going to do something far more powerful. I was going to show them. And when they finally saw the truth, laid bare, undeniable, beyond their ability to spin or minimize, they would have no choice but to confront the lies they had been telling themselves all along. The lie that wealth is loud. The lie that value comes from appearances. The lie that kindness equals weakness. They had mocked me for years, trying to tear me down without even realizing it. Now, they were about to learn that real strength isn't flashy. It's quiet. It's steady. It's unshakable. And in the end, the empire I had built, brick by painstaking brick, would stand as proof, not just for them, but for everyone who ever felt small because they chose a different path. This mattered because it wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving me right. It was about taking back every insult, every smirk, every dismissive laugh, and turning it into a triumph so complete, so irrefutable, that even their pride couldn't deny it. I wasn't poor. I wasn't a failure. I was everything they had pretended to be. And more. They just hadn't opened their eyes yet. But they would. Soon. The idea came to me one evening while I was sorting through old papers, updating my investment portfolios, and reviewing the annual reports from my rental properties. It was a quiet moment, the kind that used to make me feel invisible. Now, it made me feel powerful. I didn't need to wave around my success. I just needed the right moment to reveal it. The opportunity practically landed in my lap. 2 weeks later, when my parents announced they were hosting a grand family celebration, Dad's 70th birthday and their 40th wedding anniversary combined. They planned a huge gathering, inviting not just immediate family, but extended relatives, old friends, and even some business associates. "You'll be there, won't you, Ellie?" my mother asked over the phone, her tone almost pleading. Of course, I would be there. Only this time, I wouldn't be coming, as the family punchline. I started planning immediately, carefully, methodically, just like I had built everything else in my life. First, I decided on the venue. They were struggling to cover the cost of the fancy event hall they had booked, something they whispered about when they thought no one was listening. I quietly stepped in and offered to pay the remaining balance. At first, they were hesitant. Pride, I suppose. But eventually they accepted, relieved more than anything else. They probably assumed it was a stretch for me, some grand gesture that would leave me financially strained. If only they knew. Next, I contacted the event organizer myself, offering to handle a few details: the seating chart, the slideshow, presentation, the guest welcome materials. My mother was thrilled to hand off the boring stuff to me, thinking I would just shuffle name cards around. But I had a different idea in mind. The slideshow would be a centerpiece of the evening. Photos, memories, a timeline of our family's history. Everyone loves a good nostalgia trip, right? But I decided to include a little something extra. A segment called Paths to Success, highlighting various family members' accomplishments over the years. It would start harmlessly enough. Mark's flashy car dealership, Kyle's real estate ventures, my sister-in-law's boutique shop, all the things they bragged about endlessly. And then, me. But not the poor Ellie they thought they knew. I gathered the facts, a snapshot of the deed to my rental properties, graphs of my investment growth over the last decade, photos of the affordable but strategic duplexes and triplexes I had acquired quietly, letters of appreciation from charitable foundations I had donated to over the years, anonymously until now. A screenshot of my portfolio balance, a 7-figure number they would never have guessed. I wasn't going to brag or gloat. I was simply going to show them. Documented, indisputable, undeniable. At the end of my segment, I included a simple quote: "Wealth is what you don't see." Morgan Housel, The Psychology of Money. That was the truth they needed to hear. Of course, I knew there would be backlash, confusion, maybe even anger. People don't like having their assumptions shattered, especially not in public. But I wasn't doing this to humiliate them. I was doing it to open their eyes. Maybe someone like Mia would see it. Maybe she would remember it when she got older and realized she didn't have to live life chasing approval through spending. Maybe she would remember her poor Aunt Ellie and understand the real meaning of security and success. And even if no one else understood, I would. I would know I had finally taken control of my own story. No more being the quiet, invisible one. No more letting their ignorance define me. The plan was simple. Let the facts speak louder than any insult ever could. It was time to turn the tables. It was time for them to see me. Not the version they had invented to make themselves feel superior, but the real me. The one they never saw coming. In the weeks leading up to the party, I worked quietly but deliberately. Every detail had to be perfect, not flashy, authentic. That was key. First, I finalized the slideshow presentation. I organized the photos so the Paths to Success segment came naturally after the sentimental family memories. It wouldn't feel out of place. It would feel like a celebration of everyone's milestones. I made sure each family member's highlight was tasteful and respectful. No exaggerations, no hidden digs. I wanted it to be undeniable that I was playing fair, and that my success was real. Second, I gathered the documentation I needed to back everything up. This was critical. I knew my family, especially Mark and Kyle. The moment they felt outshined, they would scramble for excuses. It's fake. She's lying. She must have married rich. So I was ready. Copies of property deeds with my name as sole owner. Bank statements showing consistent rental income. A breakdown of my investment growth over the years from my financial advisor. Sanitized, but detailed enough to be convincing. Donation receipts to charities under my name. Even screenshots of my zero debt status, including my fully paid-off modest home. If they wanted proof, they'd get it, served cold, and without apology. Third, I prepared myself emotionally. This wasn't just about showing my family what they had failed to see. It was about standing firmly in my truth, no matter how they reacted. I practiced staying calm in front of the mirror, imagining their gasps, their scoffs, their attempts to diminish me. I reminded myself again and again, their approval does not validate my worth. Their ignorance does not diminish my success. I even rehearsed a few simple lines to use, if confronted. I've always preferred quiet success to loud struggle. I'm proud of what I've built. I don't need to justify it. Sometimes the real luxury is freedom, not things. Short, firm, and final. Fourth, I made sure my entrance to the party matched my strategy. No designer dress, no flashy jewelry, no expensive car pulling up to the valet. I wore a simple, elegant outfit. Timeless, not trendy. Clean lines, soft colors. I arrived in my reliable, modest sedan, the same one they had teased me about for years. Because my power wasn't in changing to meet their shallow expectations. It was in staying exactly who I was, and letting the truth dwarf the illusions they clung to. Finally, I mentally prepared for the possibility that not everyone would react the way I hoped. Some people might be genuinely happy for me. Some would be shocked and embarrassed. Others would double down on their delusions to protect their pride. I wasn't doing this for their applause. I was doing it for the truth. And for the people quietly watching. The ones who needed to know that you could live differently. That you didn't have to broadcast every win to be winning. That sometimes, the quiet path leads to the loudest victory. The night before the party, I barely slept. It wasn't nerves. It was anticipation. All the years of being mocked, minimized, overlooked, they were culminating in this moment. Not for revenge, but for reclamation. I wasn't walking into that banquet hall as the black sheep anymore. I was walking in as the dark horse, the one they never saw coming, the one they never bothered to understand, the one who had been winning all along. And tomorrow, the truth would finally come to light. Not because I screamed for their attention, but because success, when built right, speaks for itself. Loud, clear, unstoppable. The banquet hall buzzed with excitement. Crystal glasses clinked, silverware scraped against fine china, and the air was thick with the sugary aroma of expensive floral arrangements. I moved quietly through the crowd, exchanging polite smiles, accepting quick, half-hearted hugs. It was the usual dynamic. Warm, greetings layered over thinly veiled condescension. "Good to see you, Ellie. Still working that little office job." "Ellie, you should really let me set you up with a financial planner." "You're so admirable. Living simply like that." I just smiled and nodded, my heart steady, my pulse calm. They had no idea. Finally, after the speeches and the endless toasts, the lights dimmed. It was time for the slideshow. At first, it was all laughter and warm sighs, childhood pictures, wedding photos, grainy images of family trips and birthday parties. Nostalgia blanketed the room in a soft, sentimental glow. And then, seamlessly, the Paths to Success segment began. Mark's dealership photo flashed across the screen, him shaking hands over a luxury car, grinning ear to ear. Polite applause. Kyle's real estate company logo came up next, him cutting a ribbon at a new development. More applause, slightly louder. My sister-in-law's boutique, stylish and perfectly curated. Scattered claps, a few murmured compliments. And then, mine. At first, there was silence. A photo of the first duplex I bought, small but sturdy, faded into view. Then another, larger property. Then another. Screenshots of rising investment graphs. Images of rental checks stacked neatly. Letters from charities, thanking Ms. Eleanor James for her generous contributions. And finally, a crisp snapshot of my portfolio balance, the numbers unmistakable, undeniable. 7 figures, no loans, no debt, just quiet, relentless growth. I glanced around the room. Mouths hung open. Whispers rippled through the tables like an electric current. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat, shooting Kyle a wide-eyed look. Kyle's wife leaned over to whisper something sharp and urgent into his ear. My mother's hand covered her mouth, her eyes wide and unblinking. My father sat still as stone, a strange, unreadable expression on his face. And then, just as the murmurs threatened to boil over, the final slide appeared. Wealth is what you don't see. Morgan Housel. A simple, clean fade to black. The lights came up slowly. For a moment, no one moved. No one knew what to say. I stood up, adjusted my dress calmly, and walked toward the front where the organizer handed me the microphone for the final toast. I didn't need to say much. Happy birthday, Dad. Happy anniversary, Mom. I'm grateful for everything you've taught me, especially the lesson that the greatest victories aren't always the ones you show off. Sometimes the real success is just living free. I raised my glass. There was a beat of stunned silence, then applause. Real, reluctant, scattered at first, but growing. Not everyone clapped. Mark didn't. Kyle didn't. But some of the older relatives, the ones who had been quietly struggling to keep up appearances all their lives, they clapped the loudest. And out of the corner of my eye I saw Mia, my goddaughter, smiling at me. Really smiling. As if she saw me clearly for the first time. And in that moment, I knew it had all been worth it. Later, after the cake had been cut and the party wound down, a few relatives approached me, quietly, humbly. Ellie, would you mind talking to my son about managing his savings? Ellie, could I ask your advice about investing? Ellie, I had no idea. You must be so proud. I answered every question with patience, not with gloating, because this was never about revenge for me. It was about reclaiming the narrative. It was about proving, to them and to myself, that quiet diligence could stand taller than empty boasting. Mark and Kyle left early, mumbling, excuses about early meetings. Let them. They would stew in their own pride for a long time. They would wrestle with the truth they couldn't unsee. And me, I drove home that night in my same old car, the cool night air streaming through the open window, feeling lighter than I had in years. They had mocked me for my thriftiness. They had pitied me. But in the end, I had built a life so solid, so secure, that nothing they thought or said could touch me. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their admiration. I had everything I needed. And now, finally, they knew it too.